Off the coast of Guatemala, an old U.S. Navy ship is about to cross paths with the cartel's most discreet and profitable route. A narco-submarine loaded with several tons of cocaine. How did this frigate, almost at the end of its career, become the traffickers' floating nightmare? In the vast breadth of the Eastern Pacific, where the water stretches into a horizon without contour, and where the sky melts into the sea like an ancient oath, an invisible line crosses the waves. It starts in the depths of Colombia, runs up toward Mexico, and finally breaks against the insatiable shores of the United States. This line is neither a commercial route nor a track drawn on official charts. It is a corridor of shadow, a corridor of white powder. Off the coast of Guatemala, this corridor narrows. There, the ocean bends to the fate of the Central American Isthmus, that narrow land bridge that links two continents and has borne, for decades, the weight of trafficking. The cocaine leaves the Andean jungle, slips along clandestine airstrips, piles up in scorching hideouts, then reaches the seas. It heads north, changes hands, changes flags, but not nature. In the darkness of the Office of National Drug Control Policy reports, in the dry pages of the International Narcotics Control Strategy reports, this route appears as numbers, percentages, tonnages. But on the water, it takes on flesh. It becomes a wake, diesel smoke, a man's gaze scanning the horizon. At the heart of this liquid theater, one name stands out, silent and heavy. Joint Interagency Task Force South, JIATFS. A fortress of glass and cables set in Key West, Florida. There, in the sticky heat of the tropics, screens keep watch. Operators cross-reference data from satellites, patrol aircraft, ships scattered from the Caribbean basin to the far reaches of the Eastern Pacific. There, neutral voices, cold acronyms, give birth to decisions that, farther away, will make engines roar and orders crack. The Eastern Pacific is their hunting ground. The area off Guatemala, their strategic crossroads. For years, reports have been piling up. U.S. Coast Guard experts and UNODC analysts reach the same conclusion. The sea from eastern Colombia northward is becoming the main artery of cocaine. The Atlantic route still matters, but it is here, on this mist-drenched Pacific flank, that the decisive game is played. Tons of powder, every year, slip through the net. And already, a new word weighs on officers' lips: semi-submersible. At the beginning of the 2000s, in the briefing rooms of U.S. Southern Command, a silhouette appears on the screens. A low hull, an almost flat shape. Not a ship, not a plane, not a simple raft. An object of transition between air and water. The documents call it a Self-Propelled Semi-Submersible, SPSS. The first reports seem vague. A noise, a rumor from Colombia. Then the evidence builds up. Furtive photos, partial interceptions, hulls burned out in the mangroves. The Colombian cartels are inventing a new monster. In the isolated estuaries of Colombia's Pacific coast, mangroves raise their roots like gnarled hands. Above, the leaves smother the light. Below, the mud keeps the secrets. It is there that the narco-submarines are born. Clandestine shipyards hide in the winding channels of muck, protected by the jungle, by the silence of nearby villages, by fear. Fiberglass arrives on dugout canoes. Second-hand diesel engines, recovered and modified, wait under greasy tarps. Anonymous workers, paid in cash, bend their backs. They cut, sand, rivet, glue. Little by little, an elongated shape comes to life. The hull is thin, almost fragile. The profile is so low that, seen from afar, it merges with the swell. The cabin barely protrudes, like a timid bump on the surface. A silhouette designed to hide, not to confront. Patrol radars barely pick it up. The sea protects it. Inside, a narrow space, just enough for 3 or 4 men. A diesel engine growls at low speed. Fuel tanks, grafted anywhere a spare inch exists, extend the possible range. And above all, in the center, the cargo. Several tons of cocaine, packed into bundles, wedged together like bricks in a windowless wall. Over the years, Colombian seizures confirm what sailors had already feared. The press releases of the Armada Nacional de Colombia display hulls painted blue, green, camouflaged. They are found half buried in the mud, abandoned mid-construction, or ready to put to sea. The figures make their way to Washington. Between 2006 and 2009, detecting them becomes an obsession. Destroying them, a race against time. In the United States, the U.S. Coast Guard compiles the data. Several dozen SPSS are detected or neutralized each year, starting from 2007-2008. But each interception hides a question. How many slip through the net? In the hearing rooms of Congress, the voices of officers rise. They describe almost invisible craft, capable of transporting in a single trip quantities that once would have required an entire flotilla of small boats. They speak of night, of rain, of blank screens, of silent radars, while the cargo glides just a few miles away. Reports from the Government Accountability Office repeat the same complaint. Detection is a challenge, almost an enigma. SPSS lower themselves, camouflage themselves, fall silent. Yet they carry fortunes. The American response is searching for its form. Southcom coordinates, gathers, aligns. The Navy, the Coast Guard, the DEA, CBP, and others learn to speak to each other in low voices. Bilateral agreements multiply, with Colombia, Guatemala, Mexico, the Central American states. The INCSR lists the signatures and the clauses, chase authorizations, intelligence sharing, joint patrols. On the waves, these words take the form of ships flying different flags, but with antennas turned in the same direction. At the center of this network, GIADF-S becomes the beating heart. In its cold-lit rooms, intelligence fusion goes on without respite. Satellites observe the coasts. P-3 Orions trace slow arcs above the sea. Embarked helicopters scan the shadows. Surface ships ply discrete routes. Every radio, every radar, every patrol boat sends back fragments of reality. Analysts assemble them, weigh them, compare them. When the threat is an SPSS, hesitation time shrinks. The enemy appears only in flashes. But another weakness gnaws at the fight, more insidious than the shadow of hulls. It comes neither from the sky nor from the sea. It comes from the law. On the high seas, when an SPSS is spotted, the script is known. In the distance, the military vessel approaches. The guns are visible, the armed silhouettes too. Then the traffickers act. They open the valves. They pierce the hull. They throw their cargo into the sea. The SPSS slowly sinks, then disappears. When the Coast Guard arrives, there remains only an indifferent sea and a few exhausted, soaked men perched on a life raft. Without material evidence, prosecutions dissolve. The legal vacuum becomes a refuge. In Washington, anger takes the form of law. In 2008, Congress forges a new instrument, the Drug Trafficking Vessel Interdiction Act. Through this law, signed by President George W. Bush, vessels without nationality themselves become the object of the offense. Using an SPSS to transport drugs becomes a crime, even if the powder disappears before seizure. The sea, until then an accomplice, loses a bit of its protective anonymity. The DTVIA casts its nets beyond the American coasts, toward the high seas, where no flag flies, where narco-submarines still believe they can play at being ghosts. In congressional debates, the words are clear. Fill the void. Break the scuttling maneuver. Make justiciable those who, until now, slipped between the lines. The extraterritorial nature is assumed, asserted. The absence of nationality of the vessel does not matter. The horizon without land does not matter. If the intent to traffic is proven, the law will fall. Analyses from the Congressional Research Service confirm it. From now on, the mere existence of the SPSS, its use in this obscure theater, is enough to trigger the American judicial machine. Very far from there, in the Pacific surf, an old ship continues on its way. The USS McInerney, an Oliver Hazard Perry-class frigate, has been cutting through the water since 1979. Its hull has already crossed the Cold War, Atlantic deployments, multiple exercises. Now it serves Southcom. Its mission is no longer to face an enemy armada, but to hunt stealthy silhouettes, suspicious freighters, nervous go-fasts, and these new monsters half buried in the sea. On board, the crew has grown used to this role of silent hunter. The frigate embarks a U.S. Coast Guard detachment, a Lidette. Men in different uniforms, but integrated into shipboard life. They are the ones who carry the legal authority to conduct boardings, the ones who go aboard suspicious vessels, who pronounce the words that seal a seizure, who read rights to men shivering under the sun. On the aft deck, an SH-60B Seahawk helicopter waits, a taut silhouette, blades motionless for now. Its task? To see farther than the ship's eyes, to run faster than the sea. It is 2009. The previous years had forged a certainty. SPSSs were no longer a curiosity, but a major threat. U.S. Coast Guard statements were becoming more frequent. Southcom's warnings were getting more urgent. In the corridors of GIATF-S, a new tension could be read on faces. A significant share of the cocaine moving up through the eastern Pacific now traveled in these semi-submerged hulls. The official figures said so. The sailors, for their part, felt it in their sleepless nights. Pressure was coming from above. Prove that the DTVIA is not a dead letter. Show that the new sensors, the new cooperation schemes, are making a difference. Off the coast of Guatemala, the USS McInerney takes its place in this reinforced surveillance strategy. It is no coincidence, no stray presence. Its deployment follows a plan, a rotation decided by Southcom and GIATF-S. For the crew, it is one more deployment. For Destiny, it is a rendezvous. End of September 2009. The eastern Pacific breathes heavily under a low sky. The Guatemalan coast is only a distant gray line, almost mythical. On the USS McInerney, the screens keep watch. In the corridors of GIATF-S, far to the north, operators follow the dance of dozens of icons. Above the frigate, the Seahawk tears itself from the deck, its blades whipping the air, its rotor rumbling. In the cockpit, the pilots scan the moving carpet of the ocean. The sensors sweep. The cameras search for anomalies. A wake that is too discreet. A shape that looks like neither a fishing boat nor a cargo ship. Official sources will later speak of a detection by aerial means associated with the USS McInerney. That day, in the controlled din of the cabin, an operator spots a detail. There, a thin trace, almost shy, cuts the surface. No visible superstructure, no mast, barely a protrusion. The Seahawk drops a little lower, changes angle. The shape becomes clearer. A low hull painted to disappear. A modest cabin. The water almost licks the deck. The sensors confirm the weak radar signature. For those who know, the verdict is clear. SPSS. The information races fast to the ship. Then from there, via secure links to Key West. Giatif S listens, questions, compares. The coordinates match a corridor already mapped as a probable semi-submersible route. The distance to the coast, the supposed heading, everything points to a route from Colombia to Central America. The doubt melts away. On board the USS McInerney, the atmosphere thickens. Deck officers lean over the navigation screens. The frigate adjusts its course. Not too fast, not too close. The objective is clear. Monitor without making them flee. On the secure channel, the Seahawk's voice describes the scene. The SPSS moves forward, slowly, stubbornly. It seems unaware that it is already being watched from above. Then begins a silent hunt, without barking. The Seahawk keeps its distance, plays with angles, stays just out of direct visual range. The ship, for its part, corrects its course, adjusts its speed to place itself on an interception trajectory. In Key West, Giatif S operators draw vectors, estimate time, calculate margins. Every minute counts. Too early, and the SPSS crew may scuttle the hull, disappear. Too late, and it will slip into more complex waters, where other ships, other stakes, will make interception more delicate. The airwaves boil, but remain invisible. Between the USS McInerney, the Seahawk, and the command center, secure communications tick off coordinates, codes, references to rules of engagement. The voices are calm, almost monotonous. Yet beneath these words, a dull tension. The decision is taking shape. On the deck of the USS McInerney, the leadette men get ready. Suits, vests, weapons. The RHIBs, those fast, rigid-hull boats, are already quivering against the ship's side, held by their davits. The Seahawk, up above, tightens its circle, ready to mark the target, to designate it like a luminous arrow over the theater of steel and water. The frigate draws nearer. The waves slap against her hull. On board the SPSS, a few silhouettes may finally see a dot growing on the horizon. The muffled rumble of the warship's turbines mingles with the heavy breath of the semi-submersible's diesel engine. Time contracts. The RHIBs are launched. They plunge, hit the surface, leap forward. On board, the leadette members cling to the handholds, their eyes fixed on the barely visible target. The orders are clear. Interception. Communication in accordance with international protocols. Boarding without unleashing violence. The DTVIA, invisible but present, hangs over them like a legal blade. The boats race forward. At very close range, procedures take over from pounding pulses. Radio calls. Sound signals repeated, insistent. Stop orders issued in the international language of the sea. The SPSS hesitates. The men on board can now clearly see the armed silhouettes, the uniforms, the helmets. They know what the combined presence of a large ship, a helicopter, and those boats bearing American crests means. In other stories, in other seas, gunshots crack out. Here, that day, the legend takes another path. The crew of the semi-submersible yields. The SPSS stops, subdued, like a beast caught in a trap. No official account mentions any exchange of fire. No shootout, no bodies floating. Just surrender, dry, bare. The leadette men board. They climb quickly onto the low hull, find a foothold, haul themselves up onto that narrow deck the sea caresses with a possessive touch. Weapons sweep the space. Orders fly. Inside, 3 or 4 men with tired faces and damp clothes raise their hands. The SPSS is taken. Securing it follows routine. But that day, every gesture weighs heavier. Methodical search. Check of the engine room. Inspection of access points. Then comes the discovery everyone has been waiting for. There, in the fiberglass entrails, in the tight belly of that hull, bales are stacked. Tight wrappings, marked, standardized according to the pitiless codes of the cartels. The cocaine is there. Multi-ton, as the press releases will soberly put it. Enough to flood entire cities, to fuel distant street wars. Cameras start clicking. Photos, videos. The USS McInerney's teams document everything. Every package, every corner, every face. These images will later burst forth on official websites, in the columns of the press, as evidence, as symbols, as trophies. On the frigate's deck, the SPSS crew members come up one by one, handcuffed, surrounded by guards. They speak a Latin American language and bear in their features the imprint of a continent of poverty and violence. Their names, their precise nationalities, will come later, laid open in Department of Justice releases. For now, they are silhouettes captured by the sea. The decision is made to transfer them, and the cargo, to a port under U.S. or partner jurisdiction. The DTVIA is watching. No more possible scuttling. No more erasing the evidence. This time, the SPSS is not swallowed by silence. It is seized like an enemy vessel, like a weapon. A few hours later, the announcement spreads. The U.S. Navy, the U.S. Coast Guard, and perhaps already the Department of Justice release neutral words, precise figures, approximate coordinates. The USS McInerney, off the coast of Guatemala, has intercepted an SPSS loaded with cocaine. The crew is captured. The cargo is seized. A major operation, they say. A first complete one, others murmur. Over the days, the echo grows. U.S. officials highlight the emblematic nature of this 2009 interception. Vessel, cargo, crew. The triptych is intact. In Southcom circles, they emphasize the perfectly oiled mechanism. Aerial assets, interagency intelligence, the boarding capability of the Coast Guard embarked on a Navy ship. The long-sought model takes shape. In the analyses, another word recurs, discrete but central. DTVIA. The new law, still young, finds here an ideal field of application. No more need to lament a cargo vanished into dark depths. The simple presence of this vessel without nationality, its use in this notoriously infamous corridor, now suffices to build the case. Legal experts and Coast Guard officials see in it confirmation that the law can, at times, catch up with the cartel's cunning. Aboard the USS McInerney, the excitement gradually subsides. What remains is the tally. The figures for the seized cocaine, converted into street value, are dizzying. Tens, perhaps hundreds of millions of dollars worth of merchandise. A trafficking team now in the hands of justice. The return to a designated port becomes a procession. With every mile traveled, the symbolic value of the seizure grows. At the dock, the scene is replayed 1,000 times in official files. Prisoners are handed over to the authorities, the bales of cocaine unloaded, weighed, catalogued, locked under seal. The releases highlight the performance of the ship, her crew, the Lidette. The USS McInerney shines in internal accounts as an example to follow. On U.S. soil, another battle opens. In a federal jurisdiction, proceedings are launched against the SPSS crew members. The DTVIA is brandished alongside other narcotics trafficking laws. Department of Justice press releases detail, when the time comes, the charges brought, the penalties incurred. Later, sentences will be handed down. Years of prison, long and unrelenting, will come to seal the fate of these men taken at sea. In Congressional Research Service reports, this case is cited as a textbook example. A first significant application of the new legal framework to an SPSS intercepted on the high seas. A victory, some say. A message, others correct. Narco-submarines are no longer just an elusive rumor. For the forces involved, the operation becomes material. In the after-action reports of the Navy, the Coast Guard, and GIATF-S, every choice is revisited. The initial detection by the Seahawk, the discretion maintained until the chosen moment, the tight coordination with Key West, the boarding without firing a shot. The lessons take shape, turn into doctrine. Already, they are thinking of the next hulls to come, of the future nights when a simple trace on the water will decide everything. The strategy is consolidated. Interagency intelligence, air assets, surface vessels, embarked Lidettes. The 2009 pattern becomes a model to be replicated. In the following years, the speeches of the U.S. Coast Guard and Southcom often return to this example. Before Congress, at conferences, the 2009 seizure is cited as proof that the fight against SPSS can bear fruit.
And yet, in the Eastern Pacific, the sea does not yield. The annual figures from the U.S. Coast Guard and UNODC show a continuous increase in detections and interceptions after 2009. But they also hint, in negative space, at the shadow of those who get through. The cartels are learning too. They invest more. They improve their hulls. The word narco-submarine takes on another meaning as some vessels gradually become fully submersible. For the USS McInerney, this chapter of glory comes late. In 2009, the frigate is already one of the oldest of its class. Her plates have seen service. Her systems have been renewed, adapted. She could have been reserved for secondary roles. On the contrary, she proves that even a ship from another era can inscribe its name in modern battles. Those where the enemy does not fly a flag, but carries a cargo. Soon, the official story will say it. The USS McInerney will leave active service. Decommissioned, transferred to the Bangladeshi Navy, she will continue another life under another flag. But in the archives of the U.S. Navy, in the memory of her crews, the 2009 operation remains one of the last highlights of her American career. A final, successful hunt before the silence of another horizon. Experts, academics, authors of reports on maritime security seize on the case. They dissect the chase, the seizure, the application of the DTVIA. They see in it the technical challenges of SPSS: stealth, endurance, volume. They also see the legal challenges:
extraterritorial jurisdiction, proof of intent, international cooperation. The 2009 Interception becomes a case study, cited in symposia, in specialized articles, in training manuals. In the corridors of Southcom, the lesson is clear. The sea remains a shifting battlefield. The USS McInerney affair justifies the continuation of investments. More sensors, more air assets, patrol aircraft, embarked helicopters. More ties woven with regional navies to tighten the net around these flagless convoys. The officials repeat it, year after year. SPSS and their submersible heirs remain a priority. Thus, in the grand chronology of the fight against narco-submarines, the 2009 operation stands as a milestone. Before, SPSS grow in the shadows, benefit from gaps in the law, defy radars through their modesty. After, they remain numerous, sometimes more sophisticated, but they know that the sea is no longer quite their ally. The law has crossed the waves. The eyes that scan the eastern Pacific, from Guatemala to the maps in Key West, no longer blink.